My name is Sophia Miller, and I never imagined that my mother's funeral would be the moment my family erased me entirely. It was a gray, humid morning in Austin, Texas. The air outside St. Augustine's Cathedral clung heavy with silence, broken only by the low murmur of guests gathering under black umbrellas. I hadn't been home in nearly 4 years, not because I didn't want to, but because I wasn't welcome. I stepped out of the rental car, straightened my black dress, and took a deep breath before walking toward the chapel. Eyes turned toward me almost instantly. Some widened, some narrowed, but none were warm. Inside, the scent of lilies and wax hung in the air like old regret. I walked past rows of familiar faces, who now looked at me like I didn't belong. My Aunt Rebecca, cousins I grew up with, even old neighbors. Most of them whispered, others just stared. The words floated through the silence. Is that Sophia? I thought she wasn't coming. She has some nerve showing up after all these years. I took a seat in the middle row, alone. Daniel, my older brother, was already seated in the front with Aunt Rebecca and a group of sharply dressed hospital executives, no doubt colleagues from the Miller Health Network, the family empire. He turned and looked at me, then leaned over to Aunt Rebecca with a smirk that sent a chill up my spine. I didn't need to hear the words to know exactly what he was saying. A minute later, I got confirmation. As the service ended and people began to rise, Daniel approached me, flanked by two of our cousins. He didn't even lower his voice. So, the prodigal daughter returns, he said with mock surprise. Let me guess, finally decided to care now that there's a will to hear? There was a flicker of uncomfortable silence around us, but no one stepped in. I came to say goodbye to Mom, I said quietly, keeping my voice steady. You know, the woman who raised me. Daniel laughed, a sharp, cold sound. Raised? You mean the one you abandoned when you ran off to heal the world with your therapy degrees? My cheeks flushed, but I didn't give him the satisfaction of reacting. Aunt Rebecca stepped beside him, placing a manicured hand on his shoulder. Sophia, she said in a tone that might have passed as polite if it weren't dripping with judgment. This is a very difficult time for all of us. Let's not stir things up, okay? I'm not here to stir anything, I replied. I'm here to honor my mother. Daniel rolled his eyes. Right. Honor her by ignoring her last 3 birthdays and skipping every family gathering since 2020. You know what people are saying, don't you? I looked around. I knew exactly what they were saying. That I left. That I was selfish. That I turned my back on the family business and on Mom. And maybe the worst part, some of it was true, but not the way they thought. Daniel took a step closer, lowering his voice just enough. You might want to skip the will reading tomorrow, he whispered. Mom made her feelings about you pretty clear. No need for more embarrassment. I didn't respond. I just turned, walked away, and sat quietly in one of the back pews as people slowly made their way to the reception hall. They thought they had the full story. They thought I was just there for the money. But none of them were prepared for what Mom left behind. Growing up, my mother wasn't just the CEO of Miller Health Network. She was my hero. Elizabeth Miller built her reputation on compassion. A brilliant physician turned hospital executive, she had founded a chain of private clinics and rehabilitation centers across Texas, many of which catered to underserved communities. And somehow, despite her intense schedule, she was always there, present at my school art fairs, late-night science projects, piano recitals, and, most memorably, our Sunday volunteering shifts at the Children's Hospital. You don't treat symptoms, she used to say. You treat people. For the longest time, I thought I'd follow in her footsteps. I even used to play doctor with my dolls, diagnosing them with made-up illnesses and scribbling little prescriptions on sticky notes. But everything changed the year I turned 16. That's when I met Claire. Claire was 8. She'd been admitted to the hospital where Mom worked after being pulled from a horrific domestic abuse situation. I wasn't supposed to be involved. I was just a kid, tagging along. But something in Claire's eyes haunted me. Hollow. Fractured. She didn't speak for weeks. Until one day, she sat beside me in the playroom and pointed at the sketch pad I was using. Can I draw too? We sat in silence for an hour, both scribbling colors across the paper. She drew trees. I drew stars. And when she finally whispered, "You don't talk much either," I like that. My chest ached with something I didn't yet have words for. That day, I decided I wouldn't become a doctor. I wanted to help kids like Claire, but in a different way. By the time I was a senior, I had my heart set on pursuing child psychology. When I told Mom over dinner, I expected her to be surprised, maybe even skeptical, but I wasn't prepared for the look of disappointment. "Therapy?" she said slowly, her fork pausing midair. "Sweetheart, that's not real medicine." I blinked. "It's a real science, Mom, and it helps people." "You're brilliant," she interrupted. "You could be a pediatric surgeon, or go into hospital management like I did. What are you going to do with a psych degree? Sit in a beanbag chair and talk about feelings all day?" Her words stung more than I admitted. I tried to explain, to show her how trauma therapy wasn't just feelings. It was saving lives in a way scalpels couldn't. But her mind was made up. And Daniel? He saw his opening. That same week, he declared he'd be switching from sports medicine to surgery. He started spending more time shadowing Mom, showing up to board meetings, asking about expansion strategies. The golden boy, rising fast. He wore ambition like a badge of honor, and Mom loved it. "Daniel has the business sense," she said proudly to our Aunt Rebecca during a Christmas dinner. "And the drive. He'll be ready to take over one day." I was sitting right there. Even then, I didn't give up. I got into Northwestern on scholarship, pursued dual degrees in child development and clinical psychology. I emailed Mom every major milestone: my acceptance letter, my first published article, even a clip from a local TV segment I did on teen anxiety during COVID. She rarely responded. When she did, it was brief. "Glad to hear. Hope you're well. Love, Mom." It didn't make sense. Then, about a year before her death, I stopped hearing from her altogether. Birthday cards I mailed came back. Returned to sender. Calls rang out. Voicemails went unreturned. I figured she had given up on me, that maybe I really had become a disappointment. But I never imagined she hadn't even received any of it. I didn't know about the invisible hand behind the curtain. I didn't know that Daniel had slowly, methodically erased me. Not until it was too late. The reception following the funeral was held in the Miller Pavilion, the grand hall built as part of our family's flagship medical center. Polished marble floors, towering glass windows, and a giant portrait of my mother smiling down on everyone from behind the main podium. It was surreal. A shrine, one I didn't belong in. I stood by the refreshment table, barely touching the plate of fruit I was holding. Around me, murmurs rose and fell in waves. Everyone was dressed in grief, but few wore sincerity. I caught snatches of conversations. She always talked about how proud she was of Daniel. "Sophia? I thought she moved to Seattle. Isn't she a counselor or something? Or was it yoga?" I was drowning in a sea of polished shoes and shallow sympathy. Daniel, of course, was thriving. He moved through the crowd like a seasoned politician. Handshakes, hugs, measured laughter. People clung to him, hungry for proximity to power. After all, he was the presumed heir. My stomach turned. I was about to excuse myself when I felt a soft tap on my elbow. Turning, I found myself face to face with a man in his early 60s, white beard, thin spectacles, and a crisp gray suit. His eyes, unlike the others, were kind. "Miss Miller," he said gently, "may I speak with you a moment? In private?" I hesitated. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" He gave a faint smile. "I'm Henry Becker, your mother's personal attorney. I've been handling her estate for the last 12 years. My throat tightened. "Oh, I thought Daniel said—" "Daniel," he interrupted, "has not been involved in your mother's personal affairs, not the ones that matter." There was something in his tone, firm, calm, deliberate, that made me follow him without hesitation. We stepped into a small side room, away from the hum of voices and clinking glasses. He closed the door gently and turned to face me. "Your mother left very specific instructions for after her passing," he began. "Instructions that include you, Sophia. And I don't mean a line in her will." My breath caught. What kind of instructions? He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a sealed envelope. Cream-colored paper, my full name written in my mother's unmistakable cursive, Sophia Lynn Miller. "She wrote this 6 months ago," Mr. Becker said. "It was to be delivered to you in person, at the will reading." I stared at it. My name, her handwriting. My hands trembled as I took it, but I couldn't bring myself to open it yet. "Wait, 6 months ago?" I asked. "That's around the time she completely stopped communicating with me." Becker nodded. "She became suspicious, started asking questions. I believe she uncovered quite a lot in her final weeks." My head swirled. What, what do you mean?" "I can't say much yet," he replied. "But I will tell you this. Your mother had regrets, deep ones, and she wanted you to know that before anything else was said." Tears prickled behind my eyes, but I forced them back. "Why didn't she call me herself?" "I think she tried," he said, "but someone made sure those calls never reached you." Silence fell between us. For the first time since arriving in Texas, something warm flickered in my chest. Not quite hope, but maybe the first breath of it. "Mr. Becker," I said slowly, "is he going to be angry when he finds out I'm in the will?" He gave me a long, thoughtful look. "Let's just say he already is." The next morning, I dressed with shaking hands. A simple black dress. No makeup, no jewelry, just me. Raw, anxious, and carrying a sealed letter from my dead mother inside my bag like a live wire. I hadn't opened it. I didn't know why. Maybe I was afraid it wouldn't say what I needed to hear. Maybe I was more afraid that it would. The law office of Becker and Langford was on the 21st floor of a downtown high-rise, ironically, in a building funded by the Miller Foundation. When I stepped off the elevator, the receptionist gave me a tight-lipped smile and motioned toward the main conference room. The moment I opened the door, I knew I wasn't welcome. Daniel was already seated at the head of the table, flanked by Aunt Rebecca and 2 hospital board members, the same people who used to pat me on the head and call me the artsy one. Now they barely glanced at me. Across from them sat Mr. Becker, calm and collected as always. A laptop and a thick stack of documents sat neatly in front of him. "Sophia," Daniel said with a tone that oozed performative civility. "So glad you could join us." He gestured to the last open chair, at the far end of the table, not next to him, not near any family, just far enough to make a point. I sat down, refusing to show discomfort. "Let's get started." Becker cleared his throat and began. "Thank you all for coming. As you know, Dr. Elizabeth Miller passed with a legally binding will and a set of additional directives. In accordance with her wishes, today's session will begin with a video statement." A rustle swept the room. Daniel sat back, eyebrows raised. "I'm sorry, a video?" he scoffed. "Mom never mentioned anything about that." "She recorded it privately 6 months ago," Becker said evenly, "and she made it explicitly clear that the video was to be viewed before the reading of the written will. No exceptions." Daniel chuckled. "Sounds like overkill, but fine, play it." Becker nodded to his assistant, who entered the room carrying a slim silver laptop and a small projector. She dimmed the lights, connected the cables, and inserted a USB drive. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out the sound of the fans. A moment later, my mother appeared on screen. She was seated in her favorite reading chair, the floral one from her study, wearing a navy blouse and pearl earrings. Her posture was upright, but her face, tired, worried, braver than I remembered. The room went quiet. Even Daniel's usual smirk faded. Then she spoke. "Hello. If you're watching this, then I'm no longer with you. And that means there are truths that must be said now, out loud and without interruption. This message is for my family, for those I love, and for those I trusted." She paused, her eyes locking onto the camera. And somehow, it felt like they were locking onto each of us. I clutched the arms of my chair. "Some of what I say may be difficult to hear," she continued, "but I made mistakes. And this is my chance, maybe my only chance, to try and make them right." Daniel shifted in his seat. I could feel the tension ripple across the table like a storm cloud rolling in. And then, She said my name. Sophia, if you're here, and I hope to God you are, I need to speak to you first. My breath caught. The room held its collective inhale. I owe you an apology for believing lies, for not seeing the truth sooner, for letting someone else steal your voice in this family. My fingers trembled. Becker reached forward and gently pressed pause. I was instructed to stop the video briefly at this point, he said. Dr. Miller asked me to confirm that all individuals named in the will are present for what comes next. He pulled out a list. Daniel Miller? Present, Daniel said, still stunned. Sophia Miller? I nodded. Here. Becker looked up. Then we proceed. The assistant clicked play. The screen flickered back to life. My mother leaned forward slightly in her chair, her eyes now sharp, clear, no longer weary, but resolute. Sophia, I spent years thinking you turned your back on me, that you abandoned this family, abandoned me. But I was wrong, terribly wrong. A gasp caught in my throat. The air in the room felt different, tighter. 6 months ago, after a minor health scare, I started working from home more. One afternoon, I was searching for an old photo album in the downstairs study. I opened a locked drawer in Daniel's filing cabinet, and what I found changed everything. I turned my head slowly. Daniel had gone rigid, his jaw clenched. There was a bundle of envelopes, dozens of them. Letters with your handwriting, birthday cards, invitations to your gallery shows, even a small package with a framed photograph. She closed her eyes on a screen, as if reliving the heartbreak. None of them had been opened. The silence was deafening. I knew in that moment that you hadn't abandoned me. You were erased, and I had let it happen. Daniel shot up from his seat. This is fake. She must have been confused. Sit down, Mr. Miller, Becker said firmly. Your mother's instructions were to play the entire video without interruption. You agreed to that by attending. Red-faced, Daniel dropped back into his chair. His fists balled so tight the knuckles turned white. On screen, Mom continued. I confronted Daniel that evening. He said he was protecting me, that you were trying to manipulate me emotionally, that you didn't really care. But by then, I knew better. I started digging, quietly. And what I found horrified me. She reached off camera and lifted a brown folder into frame. I hired an independent investigator. What he discovered confirmed what I feared. Daniel had not only been intercepting your communications, Sophia, he had actively sabotaged any chance of reconciliation. Her voice dropped, filled with anger, the kind that simmers for years before boiling over. He redirected your voicemails, logged into my email to delete your messages, told hospital staff not to forward your invitations. And worst of all, he lied to me, over and over again. The oxygen left the room. Everyone sat frozen, eyes wide, unsure where to look. And then, I found out what he was doing at work. Another pause. Another folder held up. Falsifying reports, pushing through budget approvals for cheaper, unsafe materials, backdoor deals with pharmaceutical vendors, and suppressing malpractice concerns in at least 2 clinics. A board member gasped audibly. One of the attorneys in the room scribbled furiously in his notebook. He used his position not to honor this family's legacy, but to expand his power. At any cost. Daniel's voice cracked. You have no proof. She was ill, emotional. She was prepared, Becker said coldly, without even looking up. We have the reports, the recordings, the contracts. Everything's been notarized and archived. I could barely process what I was hearing. My mother hadn't just uncovered betrayal. She had documented it, preserved it, prepared for this moment. And then came the part I never expected. Sophia, you didn't follow in my footsteps, but you honored everything I ever stood for. Empathy, truth, healing. I watched you from afar through online articles, news clips. I saw what you built, and I was proud. My lips trembled. My eyes stung, but I didn't cry. Not yet. That's why I changed my will. A shift. Every head turned, Daniel's included. To my son, Daniel Miller, I leave a trust of $250,000, contingent upon his full cooperation with a pending ethics investigation and his voluntary resignation from any leadership role at Miller Health Network. Daniel stood up again, shouting now. "This is slander! I built this network! She wouldn't—" Becker's voice boomed across the table. "Sit down." And then, to my daughter, Sophia Miller, I leave 55% controlling ownership of Miller Health Network, including voting rights, assets, and executive authority. She may choose to lead the company or appoint a managing director. That decision is hers, and hers alone. The room erupted. Rebecca gasped. A board member muttered, "My God." I sat motionless, every word, every syllable echoing in my chest. "Sophia," Mom said softly, her voice cracking now, "I know I can't undo what I allowed to happen, but I hope this gives you a chance to reclaim your place. In this family, in this legacy, and most of all, in your own truth." The screen faded to black, and in that silence, Daniel shattered it all. "You'll regret this," he spat. "They all will." He stormed out, but I stayed seated, because this was just the beginning. The room didn't return to normal after Daniel stormed out, because there was no normal to return to. My mother's final words still hung in the air like electricity. The tension was so thick you could practically taste it. A board member cleared his throat. Another sipped water too quickly and coughed. Aunt Rebecca sat stone still, eyes narrowed like she was recalculating her entire strategy. Mr. Becker remained composed. "There are, of course, formal documents that reflect everything outlined in the video. We'll now move to the written will and assign timelines for execution of each clause." But I barely heard him. All I could hear was my mother's voice. "I leave 55% controlling ownership. She may choose to lead." Lead? Me? It didn't feel real until Becker handed me a thick folder, embossed with the company seal. Inside, legal language, share certificates, letters of authorization, and a note in my mother's handwriting clipped to the top. "If you're holding this, then I did what I should have done years ago." I held it tight like a life raft. After the meeting, as people filed out in silence, I remained seated. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with weight. This was more than an inheritance. This was a test of everything I believed in, but not everyone saw it that way. "Enjoy your spotlight," Aunt Rebecca said flatly as she passed me. "But don't expect the board to fall in line behind an amateur therapist with no business training." I looked up. "I didn't ask for any of this, Rebecca. Mom chose me." "Yes," she replied, cool and sharp. "And look where that got her." She walked out without waiting for a response. By the time I exited the building, my phone had exploded. Texts from unknown numbers, missed calls from local press, and one from Daniel, a single message. "This isn't over." I didn't respond. That evening, back at my hotel, I finally opened the envelope I'd carried with me since the funeral. Inside was a handwritten letter, dated 2 weeks before Mom passed. "Sophia, if you're reading this, it means the video has played, and the truth is out. I want you to know I didn't make this decision lightly. I know it will create chaos. You'll be resented, doubted, questioned. But I also know you can handle it. Because unlike Daniel, you listen. You see people. You heal what's broken, not just in others, but in yourself. I made you believe for so long that your voice didn't matter, that you weren't enough. I was wrong, and I'm so sorry." Tears streamed silently down my face. She'd seen me, really seen me, at last. The next day, I met with Mr. Becker and the interim board. It wasn't a warm welcome. "Let's be clear," said Dr. Kaplan, one of the longest-serving members. "This company needs leadership with a background in healthcare operations, not emotional development." I smiled politely. "And yet, what is healthcare without emotional development?" He blinked. I continued. I'm not here to micromanage surgeons. I'm here to rebuild what my mother started, something she lost track of when the bottom line became more important than patient care. They exchanged glances. I knew I was walking a tightrope, but I also knew something they didn't. I had nothing to lose. I'm appointing a managing director, I added, someone with the experience to guide operations. I'll serve as chair of the board and oversee compliance, ethics, and community outreach. And what qualifies you to do that? Someone asked. I met their eyes without blinking. The fact that my own mother, the founder, trusted me with this role. And the fact that none of you stopped Daniel when he started tearing it apart from the inside. Silence. And then a quiet voice at the end of the table. Dr. Lillian Perez, one of the only women on the board. I reviewed the internal audit reports your mother filed. Everything she said in that video, it's real. She looked at me, then nodded once. You've got my support? It was the first step, small, quiet, but it was the first stone in what would become a new foundation. 3 weeks after the will reading, I moved into my mother's house. Correction, my house now. The place hadn't changed much since I last visited during winter break in grad school. The winding staircase, the tall bay windows, the faint scent of rosewood furniture wax. But it felt different. Still, hollow, like it was waiting for someone to decide whether to mourn or begin again. I didn't sleep in her bedroom. I couldn't. Instead, I set up in the guest room overlooking the garden, the one she used to call my retreat room, back when she still remembered I needed one. Most of my days were spent at headquarters, slowly stepping into the unfamiliar terrain of corporate healthcare. My official title was chairwoman of the board, but most people, especially the ones who didn't believe I deserved to be there, called me Ms. Miller, with a certain edge in their tone, like they were daring me to flinch. I didn't flinch. I listened to patients, to frontline nurses, to maintenance staff. I walked the halls my mother once did, not just to be seen, but to see. Still, resistance lurked in subtle places. One morning, I walked into a board meeting to find Dr. Kaplan already leading discussion, without waiting for me. Another time, a former department head accidentally left me off a reply-all email that I had initiated. And Daniel? Radio silence. According to Becker, he had relocated temporarily to a villa in Costa Rica. No lawsuits, no public outbursts, just silence, which somehow felt louder than anything he could have said. But the worst betrayal came a month in, when an anonymous internal memo leaked to the press, accusing me of undermining medical leadership and endangering investor confidence. The source traced back to a private email thread started by Aunt Rebecca. Mr. Becker handled it swiftly with a public statement and legal threat. Still, it cut deep. One Friday evening, after another 12-hour day of onboarding compliance officers and restructuring patient safety audits, I returned home physically exhausted but mentally restless. I wandered into the study, her study. The room still held everything: her books, her brass reading lamp, the collection of antique anatomy sketches she loved. I ran my hand across the edge of her mahogany desk. Something clicked, literally. A faint mechanical clunk beneath the bottom drawer. I knelt down. Behind a false panel I'd never noticed before, tucked away in a shallow hidden compartment, was a leather-bound notebook and a manila folder labeled, "For Sophia, in case I don't get to say this." My breath caught. Hands trembling, I opened the folder first. Inside were articles she had clipped about my work, my name circled in pen. A printed email from a school principal in Chicago, thanking me for helping a suicidal student rebuild trust. A flyer from my first art therapy fundraiser. And a photograph I'd never seen before, of me and her, volunteering at the Children's Hospital when I was 9, both of us in matching blue scrubs, beaming. Then the journal. The first entries were simple observations. Sophia called today, sounded tired but happy. Or, Daniel suggested we block her updates from board emails. I said no, but he insisted it was for efficiency. I'm starting to wonder. But then came this. I dreamt about the fishing trip to Lake Travis. She was 7. She built a tiny paper boat and asked me if it could carry secrets across the water. I laughed. She said, "No, seriously, Mom. Where do secrets go if we never tell them?" I didn't answer. Now, I wish I had. I pressed the journal to my chest. This wasn't just a woman trying to set things right. This was a mother grieving the relationship she lost. And finally, silently, reaching back to build a bridge. The next morning, I met with Dr. Perez over coffee. "I'm going to start a foundation," I told her, "in my mother's name, but with a new purpose, to fund trauma-informed care programs in underserved schools." She smiled. "That sounds more like you than anything I've heard in these meetings." "I'm not trying to turn the company upside down," I said, "but I am trying to put its heart back in the center." She nodded. "Good, because hearts can't survive on spreadsheets alone." The night of the gala felt like standing at the intersection of two lives, the one I had built quietly in the shadows, and the one my mother left behind in marble boardrooms and family legacies. We named it the Elizabeth Grace Foundation, a tribute to her full name, and, in my view, to the grace she had finally found in truth. The foundation's mission: to provide mental health services in public schools across Texas, trauma-informed therapy, early intervention programs, and art-based healing initiatives for children who had no access to support. The gala was hosted at the renovated West Pavilion, one of the oldest buildings in the Miller Health Network, now transformed into an event space lined with soft gold lights, archival photos of Mom's early work, and children's artwork from local schools. As I stood at the back of the hall, watching the crowd mingle, doctors, educators, donors, press, I could feel something deeper than pride, peace, and finally place. Dr. Perez appeared beside me in a sleek navy dress. "I hope you realize what you've done," she said, sipping champagne. I smiled. "Let's just say it feels good to do something that doesn't need a quarterly report." Then came the moment I didn't expect. From across the room, I spotted Diane, my cousin, Rebecca's daughter, the same Diane who had once said, "Must be nice to chase dreams while the rest of us hold the family together." She looked nervous, alone, clutching a small clutch purse like it might shield her. Our eyes met. She hesitated, then walked toward me. "Sophia," she began, stopping just a few feet away. "Hi." "Hi, Diane." She let out a shaky breath. "This place looks incredible. And the cause, it's really important. I didn't realize how much you were doing." I nodded. "That's okay. Most people didn't." Silence. Then she added, "I owe you an apology." That caught me off guard. "For what?" "For assuming Daniel's version of everything was the truth. For acting like you abandoned us when really, we shut the door before you even had a chance to speak." I crossed my arms, not angry, just tired. I spent years thinking Mom didn't care. Turns out she just couldn't hear me through all the noise, and most of that noise came from our own family. Diane lowered her gaze. "I know, and I'm sorry. I'd like to fix things, if that's something you'd be open to." I studied her. The old me might have snapped or walked away, but tonight wasn't about revenge. "Fixing things takes time," I said, "and action." "I understand," she replied. "I made a donation to the foundation this morning. Small start, but start." That warmed something inside me. I offered a hand. She took it. Later that evening, I stepped up to the podium. The room quieted as lights dimmed slightly. "Thank you all for being here," I began. "This foundation began with loss, but it exists now because of something stronger: belief, in healing, in second chances, and in telling stories that were once buried." I glanced toward the portrait of my mother, projected softly behind me. My mother built a legacy of care. She taught me that lives aren't saved in silence. They're saved when we listen, when we act. A pause, then with steady breath. She once told me, "You treat people, not just their symptoms. That's why we're here. To treat the whole child, the forgotten child, the quiet one in the back of the room, the one who never raises their hand." Applause followed, genuine, warm. For the first time since I'd returned to Texas, I felt surrounded by people who saw me. Backstage, Dr. Kaplan approached me, his face unreadable. "Impressive work," he said curtly. "The foundation's numbers look strong." "Thank you," I replied cautiously. "I still think you lack traditional business training," he added. "But you're proving there's more than one kind of leadership." That was the closest thing I'd get to an olive branch, and I'd take it. Driving home that night, I took the long way, passed by the children's hospital where Mom used to take me to volunteer. I stopped the car, sat in silence, and whispered, "We're doing it, Mom. You and me." It was a rainy Wednesday afternoon when Daniel reappeared. I hadn't heard his name in over 3 months. No messages, no public statements. His absence had been both a relief and an unanswered question, one I had stopped chasing. But that day, as I stepped out of a meeting at headquarters, my assistant stopped me in the hallway. "Ms. Miller, there's someone here asking to see you. He doesn't have an appointment." "Name?" She hesitated. "Daniel Miller." I felt the temperature drop inside my chest. He was waiting in the executive lounge, the very one where Mom once hosted donor meetings and board briefings. The irony wasn't lost on me. When I walked in, he was staring out the rain-speckled window. Same suit and tie uniform. But something had shifted. The Daniel I remembered carried himself like a prince walking into his own coronation. This Daniel looked heavier. He turned when he heard the door close. "Sophia," he said quietly. "No venom, just my name." "Daniel." A long pause. Then I walked past him and sat down. "I assume you're not here to return company keys," I said. A faint smile flickered, then vanished. "I figured you'd say that." "You figured right." He didn't sit, just stood near the window like a shadow that wasn't sure it still belonged to anyone. "I've been in Madrid," he said after a moment, "trying to figure out what to do with the rest of it." "Must be hard," I said flatly, "having to live with only $250,000 and your reputation in ruins." His jaw twitched. "I deserve that," he said. I looked up. "You deserve a lot of things, Daniel, but this meeting wasn't one of them." "I'm not here to fight," he said. "I'm not even here to apologize. Because honestly, I don't know if that would change anything." I leaned back, arms crossed. Smart for once. He finally sat down, and for the first time in my life, Daniel looked human, not polished, not smug, just exhausted. "I hated how Mom lit up around you," he said quietly. "Even when you were little, you'd walk into the room with a crayon drawing and she'd drop everything. I brought home straight A's and had to wait until she was done charting patient files." I blinked, startled. "So, this was about jealousy?" He gave a half laugh. "Isn't everything? I thought if I could take her attention away from you, I'd finally be enough. When you left for Northwestern, I saw my shot." "So you took it," I said, voice hardening. "You turned her against me. I convinced myself you deserved it, that you were selfish, that your art, your therapy work, it was beneath the family name." "And now?" He met my eyes. "Now I know it was everything she admired." Silence settled again. He broke it with a question I never expected. "Are you happy?" I paused. "No," I said truthfully. "Not yet. But I'm becoming happy. For the first time, I'm doing something that feels like mine, and hers, without having to be someone else." He nodded slowly. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," he said, "but I needed you to know. I remember every lie, and I live with it every day." I swallowed. "You don't need my forgiveness," I said. "You need your own." He looked at me, eyes hollow but honest. "I don't think I'm ready for that." "Then start walking toward it," I replied, the same way I had to walk back into this building, after everyone laughed behind my back. You did that to me. But now you get to decide whether that's who you stay. Daniel stood. The chair groaned beneath him. He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the handle. "She would have been proud of you, you know." I didn't reply. Because I didn't need him to say it. I already knew. That night, I visited the hospital's memory garden, a quiet space behind the pediatric wing. It was newly renamed the Elizabeth and Sophia Healing Garden. A bronze plaque read, for the ones who were overlooked and the ones who dared to return. I sat on the bench beneath the weeping willow and whispered into the wind, "We're still healing, Mom, but I think we're almost there." 6 months later, I stood in the same boardroom where everything had once unraveled, only this time, I wasn't the outsider in the corner. I was the chair at the head of the table. Behind me, the glass wall revealed the downtown skyline bathed in golden afternoon light. Inside, the senior leadership team discussed our latest quarterly report. But unlike past meetings, this one wasn't about profits first. It was about impact. Since launching the Elizabeth Grace Foundation, we had partnered with 17 public schools across Texas. Our therapists were working in classrooms where silence used to be normal. Kids were painting again, speaking again, healing. I listened as our director of community programs gave a short update on a girl named Jada, 9 years old, diagnosed with PTSD after losing both parents. One of our counselors introduced her to art therapy. 3 weeks later, she drew a picture of a tree with 2 hearts at the roots and a tiny note at the bottom that said, "This is where love goes when it gets quiet." That one hit me hard. Because for so long, I thought love had to be loud, had to show itself in applause, in inheritance, in who got the front row seat. But now I knew better. Love sometimes whispers, love sometimes waits, and sometimes love leaves a journal hidden behind a drawer for you to find when you're finally ready. That evening, I returned to Mom's house, no longer just her home, but mine. I made a habit of reading her journal once a week, not out of mourning, but out of memory. Her words frozen in time reminded me that healing wasn't about fixing the past. It was about building something beautiful after. I stopped at one particular entry, the last one, and reread it for the 100th time. If she ever sees this, I want her to know she didn't have to be me to make me proud. She only had to be Sophia, and that would have been enough. I closed the book, tears falling without pain this time, just clarity. A week later, I hosted a small dedication ceremony for the new pediatric counseling center at our flagship hospital. We called it the Lighthouse Room because, as I said in my speech, sometimes all a child needs is one room where someone sees them, where their voice matters, where no one edits the truth. As I stepped down from the podium, I noticed a few familiar faces in the crowd: Dr. Perez, Becker, even Diane, who now volunteered with one of our partner schools. And then, near the back, standing alone but watching quietly, Daniel. He didn't come forward, he didn't wave, but he was there. And for now, that was enough. On the 1-year anniversary of Mom's passing, I returned to the garden behind the pediatric wing. I brought a bouquet of wildflowers, her favorite, and placed them at the base of the bench bearing her name beside mine. I sat down, let the breeze tangle my hair, and whispered softly, "We did it, you and me, not the way you planned, but maybe the way it needed to happen." I told her about the board's recent vote, a unanimous decision to expand the foundation statewide. I told her how the same nurses who once doubted me now sent me hand-drawn cards from their students. And then I simply sat in silence, letting the wind fill in the rest. That night, before bed, I opened my sketch pad for the first time in nearly 2 years. No commissions, no deadlines, just drawing. And for the first time, my hands didn't shake. I drew a house, nothing fancy, just a little place tucked between trees, light glowing from the windows. And inside, at a round table, sat a woman with silver-streaked hair and a girl with paint on her fingers, laughing over hot cocoa. It was me and her, somewhere we never got to go, but somehow always carried with us. Final monologue, closing narration. For years, I thought legacy meant inheritance. Now I know. Legacy is impact. It's the truth that survives when the lies have faded. It's the healing we pass on, even when we never got to fully heal ourselves. It's the garden that grows where we once buried the hurt. And if you ever find yourself sitting alone in a room full of people who don't see you, don't wait to be chosen. build your own table and let your voice be the loudest truth in the room.